Bonjour et
Good day. Thank you for being here with us today.
we will hear from Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Theresa Tam, from the Deputy Chief Public Health Officer of Canada, Dr. Howard New, from the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Disability Inclusion, Carla Qualtrough, et bien sûr le Président du Conseil.
And of course, the President of the Treasury Board, Jean-Yves Duclos.
Good afternoon and bon après-midi à tous. As usual, I will begin with an update on the latest numbers for COVID-19 in Canada. There are now 99,147 cases, including 8,175 deaths, and 61,042, or 62%, have now recovered. Labs across Canada have tested over 2,183,000 people for COVID-19 to date. Over the past week, we have tested an average of 33,000 people daily, with 2% testing positive. These numbers do change quickly and they're updated daily in the evenings on canada.ca/coronavirus. Today, I want to stop and reflect a little bit on the numbers. Although we read and post these numbers online every day, we can't forget that there is so much more behind them. Every case is a person with family, friends, and community who have been confronted with the illness and its uncertain outcomes. Some people have endured painful separation from their loved ones during severe illness and hospitalization, and many have suffered the unspeakable pain of a loved one lost to COVID-19. As I take a step back to reflect on the human stories behind the numbers today, I want to acknowledge the lives we have lost and to offer my sympathy to those who continue to grieve their loss the deepest. I don't think there is a day that has gone by when Canadians haven't considered what these numbers really mean. And I know that it's been a big part of what has united and driven us to make sacrifices to stop the virus from doing even more damage. So for those moments that we're tired of this new way of life, it helps to look back at what we've sacrificed, but also to consider the progress we've made and to gather our strength and resolve to continue forward together. Yesterday, we reached a new milestone in the percentage of cases that have recovered, with over 60% of all cases recovered. This is a sign that the epidemic has slowed enough that the new cases are no longer overtaking those coming off the long road to recovery. It also means that we've protected the health system and have been able to support severely ill cases through the worst of their illness. However, even though the epidemic growth has slowed considerably across the country, and we can now see these hopeful signs, this is the part where we gather our strength and resolve to continue our efforts. Because it may only take one new case of COVID-19 to spark an outbreak or renewed epidemic growth that could change our trajectory. The hard truth is that COVID-19 is still very much with us. There is no room for complacency with COVID-19. We all need to keep up with public health measures to maintain epidemic control. That means there is only one way to go out, and that is to go out smart, with physical distancing, frequent hand washing, and cough etiquette. This includes wearing a non-medical mask in areas where COVID-19 is still active, distance from others. Most importantly, if you have any symptoms, even if mild, it is vital that you stay home and away from others to prevent spreading the virus. Thank you. Merci.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Tam. Et maintenant, je donne la parole à Dr. Howard New.
Dr. New, you have the floor. Thank you. Good afternoon. As usual, I will begin with an update on the latest numbers for COVID-19 in Canada. There are now 99,147 cases, including 8,175 deaths, and 61,042, or 62%, have now recovered. Labs across Canada have tested over 2,183,000 people for COVID-19 to date. Over the past week, we have tested an average of 33,000 people daily, with 2% testing positive. These numbers change quickly and are updated daily in the evenings on canada.ca/coronavirus. Today, instead of moving on to another topic, I want to stop and reflect on the numbers. Although we read and post these numbers online every day, we can't forget that there is so much more behind them. Every case is a person with family, have been confronted with the illness and its uncertain outcomes. Some people have endured painful separation from their loved ones during severe illness and hospitalization, and many have suffered the unspeakable pain of a loved one lost to COVID-19. As I take a step back to reflect on the human stories behind the numbers today, I want to acknowledge the lives we have lost and to offer my sympathy to those who continue to grieve their loss the deepest. I don't think there is a day that has gone by when Canadians haven't considered what these numbers really mean. And we know it's been a big part of what has united and driven us to make sacrifices to stop this virus from doing even more damage. So for those moments that we tire of this new way of life, it helps to look back at what we've sacrificed, but also to consider the progress we've made and to gather our strength and resolve to continue forward together. Yesterday, we reached a new milestone in the percentage of cases that have recovered, with over 60% of all cases recovered. This is a sign that the epidemic has slowed enough that new cases are no longer overtaking those coming off the road to recovery. It also means that we've protected the health system and have been able to support severely ill cases through the worst of their illness. However, even though the epidemic growth has slowed considerably across the country and we can now see these hopeful signs, this is the part where we gather our strength and resolve to continue our efforts. Because it may take only one new case of COVID-19 to spark an outbreak or renewed epidemic growth that could change our trajectory. The hard truth is that COVID-19 is still very much with us. There is no room for complacency with COVID-19. We all need to keep up with public health measures to maintain epidemic control. That means there is only one way to go out, and that is to go out smart with physical distancing, frequent hand washing, and cough etiquette. This includes wearing a non-medical mask in areas where COVID-19 is still active, and you can't keep 2-meter distances from others. Most importantly, if you have any symptoms, even if mild, it is vital that you stay home and away from others to prevent spreading the virus. Thank you.
Merci, Dr. Knou.
Thank you, Dr. New.
From our Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Disability Inclusion, Carla Qualtrough. Carla, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to join you today to provide an update on the actions being taken by our government to support Canadians impacted by COVID-19 as we carefully and safely reopen our economy. We all know and agree that the best way to bring back the economy quickly and efficiently is by helping Canadians get back to work. We know that approximately 1.2 million Canadians who were getting financial help through the CERB are no longer in need of it. We also know that as of June 16th, over 223,000 employers have applied for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, supporting over 2.6 million employees across the country. Les récents chiffres sur l'emploi ont montré.
Recent job numbers have shown positive progress in terms of people returning to the workforce, but have also shown us that many Canadians are still struggling.
In the extension of the CERB by 8 weeks, at the current rate of $500 per week. We know that this will go a long way for Canadians who simply don't have a job to return to, and for workers in industries that haven't yet reopened. Extending the CERB will give workers greater confidence that they will continue to get the support they need as they face ongoing disruptions to their work and home situations due to COVID-19. The CERB will continue to be available from March 15th to October 3rd. In that time period, workers will now have 24 weeks of the CERB available to them. While the CERB has been helping millions of Canadian workers get through this difficult time, we know that this benefit is not a long-term solution. We are moving from a phase in the pandemic where we were asking everyone to stay home to a phase where workers are going back to work when it is safe and possible for them to do so. Nous tenons à ce que nos programmes continuent de soutenir les.
We want to ensure that our programs continue to support Canadians and our economy, and that is why, over the next weeks, we will continue to monitor the situation and ensure that come September, we are able to adapt our existing systems to support Canadian workers as more and more people continue to return to the labor market.
Canadians are ready and eager to do their part. We expect that workers will be seeking work opportunities or returning to work when their employer reaches out to them, provided they are able and it is reasonable to do so. We encourage Canadians to consult the Job Bank, Canada's national employment service, that offers tools to help with job searches. These expectations will be clearly set out in the CERB attestation. As I've said many times before, together we will get through this. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, thank you very much, Carla. Et maintenant, je donne la parole au président du Conseil du Trésor.
And now the president of the Treasury Board, Jean-Yves Duclos.
Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Two important announcements this morning made by the Prime Minister. The first on the extension of our agreement with the United States on our shared border, both to maintain and protect the health of Canadians and to protect and maintain the flow of people for essential reasons. Et la deuxième annonce, c'est celle.
The second announcement, our colleague Carla just summarized it. It's our extension by 8 weeks of the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit with some conditions that will take into consideration some significant improvements, yet still modest improvements with respect to the labor market. There's also an attestation that has to be signed, and it includes the fact that a person would accept work when reasonable to do so and safe to do so. Also, the Job Bank, the Government of Canada's Job Bank, which will mean that more and more jobs, the increasing number of jobs showing up in the next few weeks can be matched with certain available workers. So this context takes into consideration evolution in the labor market, while at the same time recognizing that there still are millions of Canadians today who are facing many difficulties trying to find work and a really hard time making ends meet. We are now prepared to respond to your questions.
So as usual, we'll start with 3 questions on the phone, 1 question, 1 follow-up, and then we'll turn to the room. Operator, over to you.
Thank you. Merci. Please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. Veuillez s'il vous plaît appuyer sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. La première question est de Raymond Filion de TVA. À vous la parole.
TVA, question for Mr. Duclos. The question was asked of Mr. Trudeau this morning in a scrum, but we didn't get an answer. With respect to the cost of this 8-week extension, what do you assess that to be? Answer, very good question. 2 quick answers. First, costs will, of course, evolve over the coming weeks. Initially, we already know them. My colleague Carla will be able to give you some specifics as to the cost. Costs were higher at first. We've already seen a significant decrease in the cost of the CERB for good reason. And that's because there are 1.2 million Canadians who are no longer asking for it because they no longer need it. And if I can say as an aside, that given the good results that Statistics Canada shared with us 12 or so days ago on June 5th, Statistics Canada said there were 300,000 new jobs created. However, we expect that these costs will continue to decrease over the coming weeks because, as we've said a few moments ago, we expect more and more employers to turn to the wage subsidy. Therefore, fewer workers will need the CERB.
Raymond,
Alors, quelle est la projection?
Question, what is your...
Pense en anglais, puis on te revient tout de suite.
We'll do that in English.
Briefly in English, we are mindful that the costs of the CERB have changed over the last few weeks, and for good reasons, as Minister Qualtrough, and she might want to make that even more precise, has said. Now, initially, we had a large number of CERB recipients because we wanted those Canadians to be away from work for health reasons. That has changed over the last few weeks. Minister Qualtrough did mention that 1.2 million Canadians didn't need the CERB anymore because they had found a new job. Now we expect that trend to continue over the next few weeks because we expect more and more Canadians to be able to switch to the emergency wage subsidies and therefore not to receive the CERB anymore.
Moi, je peux ajouter dans la lutte de langue, ça, au début de mois.
At the start of June, it cost $44 billion for the CERB. At its highest, it represented $17 billion per month. As my colleague said, things are changing, and the number of people on the CERB changes. Of course, if there are fewer of them, the cost is lessened. When there were 8 million people on CERB, it would be approximately $17 billion per month.
June, the cost for the CERB was around $44 billion. We know at its height, when we had 8 million people on the CERB, it was averaging about $17 billion per month. As my colleague has said, the number of people on the CERB is going down for two reasons. Firstly, because people are switching over to the wage subsidy. We've had 2.6 million workers now on the wage subsidy. And secondly, because people are going back to work. So we know in the next couple of months, we expect those numbers to go down further. We don't know yet what those exact numbers will be, but the best math I can give you is what I just did.
Thank you, Minister. Raymond, en suivi?
Follow up. So you have not assessed the cost? That's what I understand from what you said. I just was looking at what you expect for the 24-week period. You don't have an estimate of that? Answer, Minister Qualtrough. We think it will cost $17 billion maximum per month. So 17 billion times 6 months approximately, that will be the amount. But it is very difficult to assess that at this point. There is a maximum level, but we don't have the exact amount. It really depends on workers and who is taking up which program.
Prochaine question, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you. Merci. The next question, la prochaine question, is from Jordan Press from the Canadian Press. Please go ahead.
Oh, hi. Good afternoon. Just on the extension of the CERB, Minister Qualtrough, you mentioned that there would be some wording in the attestation in regards to the requirements for recipients to be looking for work or at least to take work. Can you just detail a little bit about the exact requirements that will be placed on workers as well as businesses when it comes to deciding whether someone should actually be receiving the CERB going forward?
Thank you, Jordan. So, as you know, we are hoping, the situation has changed with the CERB. When we put it in place, the CERB was a reflection of the fact that we were asking workers to stay home. And that's changed. This was not a benefit that was set up to transition people back to work. We understand that we don't want to disincentivize work. So what we're asking and expecting and telling people in the attestation they should be doing is, of course, looking for work. Now, we know Canadians want to get work and they are looking for work actively, so we don't think this is in any way a burden that anyone can't bear. We also know that there will be circumstances where work may be available, but it might not be reasonable for an individual because of their circumstances to take it. They may have childcare responsibilities, they may have elder care responsibilities, they may be ill, or they may have COVID symptoms. So we can't impose an obligation on somebody to take a job, but we are encouraging and saying that through the attestation that people actively seek work and take it when it's reasonable in their circumstances to do so.
Jordan, follow up?
Yes, thank you for that. Just on another matter, in regards to the statement from the Black Parliamentary Caucus this morning, it's signed by a number of allies. So to Ministers Duclos and Qualtrough, can you explain what your signature means as far as actions you plan to take as a cabinet minister? And for the Deputy Prime Minister, can you just explain a little bit about why your name wasn't attached to this statement?
I'm going to start just by clarifying, which is that my name is on the statement. I think that there was a snafu in one of the initial releases, but I did choose yesterday to sign it. And look, I think that the past couple of weeks have been a turning point for Canadians in really understanding that systemic racism, systemic discrimination exists in our country, that anti-Black racism exists in our country, and that we need to do something about it. And I see this statement as one of those steps. I would also really like to thank Greg Fergus for his work in putting the statement together, in working with all of us as members of his caucus on these really important issues. And I don't know if my colleagues would like to add anything.
I will say that in English because it's something that is dear to me across Canada, and certainly where I come from in Quebec City. It's something that came to me first when I heard the Prime Minister say a couple of weeks ago that for people like me, because of who I am and where I come from, and the fact that I never suffered any discrimination, the most important thing is to understand how the other and how others feel in their hearts, in their minds, and how they see and unfortunately live with the barriers that come with being a Black Canadian. And I had exchanges, very fruitful exchanges with some few days in my riding of Quebec. And I thought that the initiative that Greg Fergus was putting forward was a way to relate and to support those views that I heard in Quebec City just very recently.
And perhaps I'll add, I mean, before politics, was a human rights lawyer. And I think what's really important about the conversations that have been going on over the past weeks, is acknowledging that maybe on the face of it, some of our systems seem fair and neutral, but they're not. We have unconscious bias, we have cultural attitudes, we have predispositions to think and see things in a specific way. And these underlying systemic issues are very, very difficult to change. But if we don't even talk about them, we don't even have a place to start from. This is a really important document because it commits all of us to have those systemic conversations to challenge the assumptions that have been underlying how we make policy, how we deliver programs, how we design systems, because they don't include everyone from the start. And we know that. Those of us who've been fighting discriminations our entire careers know this, and it's about time we all acknowledge it.
Thank you. Operator, next question, please.
Thank you, merci. The next question, la prochaine question est de Hélène Bizetti du Devoir. À vous la parole.
The Devoir. Hello. My question is for Minister Qualtrough. Last week, your government tabled a bill that would have set up penalties for people committing fraud. The bill was not debated in the House, unfortunately. Have you abandoned that idea? What are your options as to any kind of penalties, given the Parliament is going to be taking its summer break? Answer. We have not abandoned that idea that we want to deal with this issue of fraud. We are tracking back individuals or cases of fraud. At this point, we don't have a legal mechanism to continue to seek these cases out, which does not mean that we're not continuing with our integrity measures. We absolutely will determine who was a recipient, a fraudulent recipient of the CERB. We are certainly continuing to detect fraud, absolutely. Second question, have you abandoned the idea of having criminal offenses addressed? Second question, Minister, all of those ministers who signed on with respect to the Black Caucus's statement, specifically with respect to mandatory minimum sentences that disproportionately affect Black and Indigenous Canadians. I would like to point out that it is an electoral promise that you made in 2015. Your Justice Minister herself at the time, Judy Wilson-Raybould, was an Indigenous minister. 5 years later, you still haven't taken action on that. Why not? Why would we believe you this time?
Maybe we can use the same order, starting with you, Deputy Prime Minister.
Merci, Hélène, pour...
Thank you, Hélène, for your question. I think this month's events showed Canadians the existence of systemic racism and discrimination in our country. When we're talking about racism, we're referring specifically to anti-Black racism. As Canadians, we also always have to talk about anti-Indigenous racism. I think this is a turning point, a time when we all have an obligation to once again reflect on this, to see again how we can take certain measures, what we can do to dismantle this racism that is systemic in nature. I think that the Black Caucus's statement and proposals are very important, and that is why the allies, the allies, have signed on to this caucus's statement, and we really do have work to do. I think this is an opportunity, actually, this time here in Canada. This time, it'll give us an opportunity to make the really important changes that need to be made. I think and I hope that as a society, we've all understood to what extent these are issues we really need to do concrete things about. Minister Duclos. Hélène, quickly, I can assure you that we haven't cast that idea aside. We are looking at a number of measures. That's one of the ideas, and this is an issue that is dear to our hearts. Recently, I was looking at statistics with respect to incarceration and overrepresentation. Black Canadians represent 3% of the population, but 9% of people in jail. Indigenous women represent 4% of the population, but 41% of the prison population among women. So these are major issues. Specifically, to get to the point you raised, we have not abandoned this issue. We continue to work and work with others. It's not entirely a federal area of jurisdiction, of course. There are a number of other issues that come along with these statistics, socioeconomic environments, the fact that certain people are deprived of certain things, relationships with the police, measures that are different, unrelated to the criminal system.
Either. Ian, I think.
Ian Wood, CTV News. Minister Qualtrough, or Duclos, Freeland, whoever wants to jump in on this one. The CERB extension today, are there going to be any more strings attached or eligibility changes?
As I said, we are sticking with $500 a week. The de minimis, or the allowable earnings, is staying at $1,000. We are going to have stronger language in the attestation that encourages, even expects workers to look for work, take work when it's reasonable for them to do so. But those will be and remain the fundamental bones of the projects, the program.
Okay. With regard to the U.S. border, is this going to is the extension, is it going to continue to apply to our land, air, and sea borders? And have we taken any precautions to stop the Americans using the Alaska loophole to come into our country? And was this a Canadian ask, seen as the U.S. is failing to flatten its curve?
So when it comes to the Canada-U.S. border, as the Prime Minister announced today, we have agreed with our American neighbors to roll over for another 30 days the measures that we have currently in place. That conversation with our American partners was very collaborative. It was based on a mutual recognition that the measures we currently have in place are working very well. And in particular, that both countries have managed to do something which is really hard, which is to have restrictions on non-essential travel in place while essential travel continues. That, the beginning, very important for the Canadian economy and for the U.S. economy. And I'm just really pleased that we have managed to achieve that And even as we are reopening our economy, we see that trade in goods, including trade in goods in the medical supply chain, continues to happen unimpeded and has done so from the beginning. The measures are exactly the same as the ones that apply today. So yes, they apply to all of Canada's borders. In terms of the situation which has been reported on in Banff, we are very clear that Canada's rules are you can enter for essential reasons, but not for non-essential ones. Just as some Canadians, for example, Canadians who live in Campobello, need to routinely cross through the United States to travel to other parts of Canada. We recognize there are Americans in that position. Having said that, the RCMP in Banff is following up on this particular report and is encouraging Canadians to let them know if they see other people who seem to fall into this category, and did the CBSA to take further care to ensure that the people coming into Canada from the US are truly coming for essential reasons. And let me just add, these measures are in place for a reason. They are to protect us and they are to protect our neighbors. Let's remember, we do still have some travel restrictions in place within Canada. As we have heard from our doctors, although we are succeeding in flattening the curve in Canada because of the hard work of every single Canadian, we're not there yet, and it's important to continue to be cautious and prudent. And I would say to our American friends and neighbors, I love the Rockies too. I grew up in Alberta. Personally, I can think of no better place to spend time, but now is not the time to visit. Hopefully, we will be back to normal at some point soon.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. Olivia?
Doctors. Deputy Prime Minister Freeland, I have a question for you about the temporary foreign worker situation with Mexico. The country is reportedly holding back as many as 5,000 temporary foreign workers. I'm wondering if you can tell us if an investigation is taking place to find out what happened to these temporary foreign workers who died of COVID-19 in Canada. What sort of protections is your government considering to put further in place to protect foreign temporary workers who are in Canada? And as well, what are you doing for Canadian farmers who are relying on these temporary foreign workers to come here to Canada?
Okay, lots of questions in there. And let me start with the most important point, which is how sad we all are about the deaths of these people who came to our country to help us. And to work hard and to help themselves and their families. And it is a real tragedy. And our hearts go out to their families and their friends. The Prime Minister yesterday had a conversation with the President of Mexico, and both leaders reiterated the strength of our relationship and our connection with Mexico. Marie-Claude Bibeau, our Minister of Agriculture, has spoken also with Mexican officials about this. We are working closely with the province of Ontario to ensure that the conditions in which temporary foreign workers live are ones that don't harm their health. And I think that all Canadians need to take that obligation very, very seriously. And of course, the employers need to take that obligation very, very seriously. Our government has provided support back in the early days of the pandemic to farmers to help support the quarantine of temporary foreign workers arriving in Canada. And it's really, really important that these workers, like everybody working in Canada, live and work in safe and healthy conditions. That's something our government is very, very concerned about, very focused on. And let me just add also, we're very grateful for the partnership and the collaboration with Mexico, the Mexican government.
My next question is for Dr. Tam. I want to ask about the recovery trial results in the UK and the drug dexamethasone. Would the Canadian government consider using it or testing it here?
So thank you for the question. So dexamethasone is a steroid, which is quite prevalent and available, of course, in Canada. And so we will look with great interest towards the actual publication of this randomized controlled trial. Right now, we're hearing it certainly at the first instance from the media, but we would like to certainly examine the trial results as they are published as well. And then, of course, have the clinicians and the people working in our hospitals and ICU consider whether this is an appropriate thing. But I think, as we've seen with many treatments being proposed in the course of learning about this new virus, it's very important for us to actually examine the results very carefully before making any further recommendations. And I would say that it would be the clinical expertise that will be applied in Canada to look at that.
Merci, Dr. Tam. On va prendre deux dernières questions au téléphone.
Two last questions over the phone.
Operator.
Thank you. Merci. The next question, la prochaine question est de Micheline Laflamme de Radio-Canada. À vous la parole.
Radio-Canada. Hello, Dr. New. I'd like to hear what you have to say about this dexamethasone drug, if you could answer that. And once you've seen these studies, if it seems as though this drug can be of use and these studies are conclusive, how long would it take before we could get this drug in use in the hospitals? Answer. Thank you for your question. As Dr. Tang has just said, we are aware. We've also seen the news and reports in the media. Of course, we look forward to reading these results in a scientific publications. This analysis is what we're going to be also discussing with our counterparts throughout the provinces and territories and researchers throughout Canada. If the results really are as conclusive, or perhaps these are very optimistic results, it's certainly something that could be considered. There would potentially then also be research studies in Canada. It's not only about what can be done in the hospitals, but also continuing on with the research. Science evolves. One single study is not enough for us to use it throughout the country. We have to approach this cautiously. We have to turn to these results and also have discussions with scientists as to the next steps in order for us to consider a study here in Canada. If we do that, I think we have expertise in Canada. We have a network. It's well established. If we do decide to have these studies done in Canada, it could be done swiftly. Thank you. Micheline, a follow-up? As to the CERB and its extension, I gather that seasonal workers whom you wanted to include in the bill will not be affected. Is there a way to broaden admissibility or eligibility, or is it only for those who have had the CERB so far that these same people could receive it for an extended period? Answer. Thank you for your question. To be clear, seasonal workers are now included in the program in the CERB. The inclusion of seasonal workers was one of those things that we wanted to do. The changes, we noticed that it would not have an effect on the seasonal workers.
Operator, last question, please.
Thank you. Merci. The last question, la dernière question, est de Mélanie Marquis de La Presse. À vous la parole.
La Presse. Question. Thank you very much. My question is for Minister Freeland. Tomorrow is an important day for Canada at the United Nations. There will be a vote as to the non-permanent seat on the UN Security Council. You were once Minister of Foreign Affairs People criticized you for having focused your energy on the U.S. to the detriment of the rest of the world. Do you think that you have done everything in your power to help Canada win this seat? The Prime Minister clearly had indicated it was a priority. Answer: thank you for your question. I'd start by saying this. Of course, the relationship between Canada and the United States is and has to be a priority for Canada. I think all Canadians understand this. And I would add that I am proud of the work that our entire government has done so as to have a good relationship with our neighbor. For every Canadian government, it is important work. It is a priority. Now, as to international relationships, generally, globally, I'm proud of all of the work our government has done. From the first time Prime Minister Trudeau was elected in 2015 onward, to me, Canadian leadership globally is very important. It's important to Canadians, and it's important for the world. We all understand that an international order that is rules-based is under threat today by a number of events. And Canada has one of the strongest voices internationally when it comes to the rules-based international order. I would also say this: values and principles that Canada stands for today are as important as ever. Values such as feminism, the defense of diversity, and the importance that multilateralism is important. I would close by saying that I'm very proud of the work our Prime Minister is doing today, internationally. And also, I'm proud of the work that François-Philippe Champagne, our Minister of International Affairs, Global Affairs, is doing. He's doing excellent work.
So look, let me just say, when it comes to the United States, Canada's relationship with the United States is and must be a priority for every Canadian government, and it has been a priority rightly for our government as well. And I think Canadians absolutely understand and recognize why it is so important for every Canadian government to do a good job with that relationship, regardless of the politics of the moment. And I will take an opportunity to thank all Canadians, to thank premiers of provinces and territories, to thank mayors, to thank union leaders, to thank business leaders for the Team Canada effort that we mounted together when it came to the renegotiation of NAFTA, which was a major job of our government and actually will only be concluded on July 1st when the new NAFTA comes into force. That was rightly a priority, and we got through it and succeeded together. When it comes to Canada in the world, our voice is important as never before. The rules-based international order, which has been at the center of Canadian foreign policy since Canada first developed a foreign policy, is under threat today. And Canada is one of the most important voices in the world, fighting for that rules-based international order, fighting to renew that rules-based internet for the 21st century. As an example, just yesterday, my colleague Mary Ng chaired a meeting of the Ottawa Group of Trade Ministers, a very important part of that effort. And some of the principles and ideas that Canada stands for are needed in the world today as never before. Feminism, speaking up for diversity, speaking up for human rights, speaking up for the environment. These are all central values for our government, and they are issues that Canada champions around the world. And let me just conclude by saying that I am really, really proud of the work that our Prime Minister is doing internationally, and really proud of the work that our Foreign Minister, François-Philippe Champagne, is doing. In fact, I was in touch with him just this morning. I know he is working really, really hard. He always does, but more than ever today.
Mélanie, en suivi.
Oui, écoutez, je rebondis.
Follow up? Okay. I'll get back to what you've just said. You referred to François-Philippe Champagne this morning, your conversation with the minister. How hopeful are you about winning this vote tomorrow, or perhaps in a second round? Answer. We have to do everything we can to win. And clearly, that is what Canada is doing today. It really is teamwork based. I would just offer the following argument that the Prime Minister has made, that François Philippe has made, that all the ministers have made through their calls with their counterparts throughout the world. And this is it, that supporting Canada for this United Nations Security Council seat means that every one of these countries would be voting for their own interest if they vote for Canada, because having Canada's voice at the Security Council is good, or will be good, for the entire planet and good for each individual country. Thank you.
Merci, Madame la Vice-Première ministre. Ceci met fin à la conférence de presse pour aujourd'hui. That's it for today. Thanks, everyone.